Today we're going to be learning how to deal with if they go knight c6 or d6. Very common, very not scary. At the end of the video, I'm going to throw in bishop to c5 just because there's not a lot of theory in dealing with this move, but it is important to know how to deal with it because if you're not careful, it could get very scary very quickly. So we'll figure out how to deal with that. So again, d6 and knight c6 are pretty interchangeable. I'm going to start with knight c6 just because it leaves more opportunity for black. And then I'm going to continue here with d6. Now, these positions resemble more of a Vienna as we're getting an early knight c3 out. And here, first, we're going to review what to do if they go bishop to g4, pinning us. If they pin us in these e4, e5 positions, you can assume the reason is they want to go knight d4 and exploit the pin. Common in like Italians, for example. We're going to go bishop to b5, and now they have three moves. They have a6, queen d7, and knight e7. First, we're going to review what to do if they go queen d7. Well, if they go queen d7, you take the pawn. Reason is, if they take back, this is a blunder because of knight takes e5, exploiting the pin. Ours comes with check, theirs does not. So after bishop d1, we would take their queen. If they take our knight, we would take their bishop. We are pinning them. We are up a pawn, very good position for white. If they take this pawn, for example, on c2 is another thing they could do. We take this bishop, misplacing their king, and then we have a very active bishop pair. It's almost like an Evans Gambit without being down a pawn. And queens are off the board. But very good position for white. So that's what to do if they go queen d7. If they go a6, arguably this is even worse. We take, disconnecting their pawn structure. And yeah, a lot of pawn islands over here, meaning we have the better pawn structure, right? That's 3 pawn islands right there. This is just 1. Our pawn structure is better. They have double isolated pawns. They have a lot of isolated pawns. So we would be happy here. I'm going to recommend just castling. Reason is, when they go bishop c5 with a check, rather than it preventing us from castling, it allows us to go king h1, which is where we want our king. Reason we want our king on h1 is we're going to rotate our queen over to e1, getting out of the pin, and we'll be threatening knight takes e5. If our king was on g1, we are never threatening knight takes e5 even after we get out of the pin, because they would have queen to d4 check and end up winning our knight as it would be a fork. So here, probably they're going to go like knight f6. We continue with queen e1. See, now we are threatening knight takes e5 because this does not come with check. And we have a bunch of threats, so that would not be good. If they take, we would just go rook takes. And I mean, look at how good your pieces are. They're about to all storm in. Bunch of pressure on this knight on f6. We even have rook over rotations with checkmating threats, and it's very easy for white to bring all their pieces over into the game. And again, we have a perfect pawn structure. One thing I wanted to review in this queen d7 line, so backing it up, queen d7, is they're not forced to take. So I wanted to go over bishop takes f3 right away. Or now. Queen takes f3, pawn takes. This is the lesser of two evils for them. We would still castle, hope that they go bishop c5 check, and now our king is on h1 where we want it to be. a6 would not be a good move because bishop takes, they cannot take with the queen, we win. They would need to take with the pawn. And just to see, they always get this bad pawn structure, or a lot of the time rather, they get this bad pawn structure. And it's very easy for us to develop and create attacking prospects in the middle game. So very comfortable position for white. Now, the last line they have is knight to e7, arguably the best line because we're not threatening to double up their pawns, damage their pawn structure. However, their knight is not on f6, and there is a drawback to that itself. So we can castle. We're not afraid of knight to d4 because they cannot play it. Now, uncommon is when they go a6, we actually do not want to snap this knight off right away. Reason is we actually want to go bishop c4. And the point behind it is if they go b5, do you see why this is a blunder? If you are thinking bishop f7, you would be correct. So here is a tactic in this line. They drop the bishop, and that is the drawback of not having the knight on f6. It doesn't guard the bishop, so we have this discovered check idea, and we would be winning. Now, let's say they go, for example, knight to d4. You still have the tactic. Bishop f7, king f7, knight g5 check. So what could they do? Well, they could go queen d7, and now we don't have the tactic because they have a defender on the bishop, which is why we would just go h3. If the bishop retreats to h5, you end up trapping it, so that is good for white. So really their only move is bishop takes knight. You then recapture with the queen. Knight d4 looks a little scary. It is not. We have so much counterplay. They can't really take this pawn on c2. If we do, we just take the pawn on e5. They can't get away with taking the rook. If they take the rook, we take the pawn with check, get this light squared clamp very close into their position. We're going to go d4. This knight is trapped. You will win it back, and then you're going to have a knight and a pawn for a rook. And if this is their extra rook, or if this is their extra rook, I mean, they can't castle. So again, activity above all in the King's Gambit. So this is all those bishop g4, bishop b5 lines. Now, let's say they go knight c6 and then take. Less scary than the main line, because now I would say their knight is even misplaced on c6. We get full control of the center, which is why we gambit the pawn on f4 itself. And let's say they try to go back into the main line with g5. You now just kick the knight away, gaining a tempo. And see, they're kind of discombobulated. You're trapping the rook. They can't go f6. Knight takes g5. Common tactic. Exploiting the pin. As always, knight g6, and now h4. So typical mainline ideas, just we have a bigger advantage because of their misplaced rook and overextended pawns. If they take, they get this cube of pawns. Thank you very much. We're doing very well. Exploiting the pin. The knight is overworked, cannot take the bishop. They lose the rook. And they could push, but then they also lose because we're attacking a defender. They're just attacking a knight. So we would be winning. Now, let's say they go d6 and then knight f6. This is another move. Let's say they don't go bishop g4. Well, we still go bishop b5. Now that they didn't commit their bishop, they can go bishop d7. That is the advantage that they claim they have in this line. I would just go d3. Whenever they kick you out, you just take the bishop here, and then you castle. And again, their bishop is faced against a pawn wall, pawn blockade, that is never going to change. And yeah, we have everything we want here. We're still going to rotate over to e1 with prospects on the king side, easy rotation. If they ever take, this just helps us. Again, very, very comfortable position for white. Nothing to worry about. Same rotations. That's the nice thing. The ideas are all similar in this knight c6, d6 stuff. So you don't need to remember specific move orders so much to say, as much as you need to remember ideas, which is funner. You know, learning ideas is fun. Memorizing moves is not fun. I do understand that. Now, I wanted to add what to do if they go bishop c5. Bishop c5 looks like a scary move, but I assure you, it is not. We're going to go over a couple moves here. I guess first we'll go over d6, right? Opening up their light squared bishop. They got the dark squared bishop out of the pawn chain. Very sensible. We're going to go knight c3. And then the way we're going to deal with this bishop on c5 is actually to go knight a4. And this is very annoying. Yes, you lose a tempo, but you get rid of their most annoying piece, I would say, which is their bishop on c5. They don't want to allow us to take and split their central pawn chain. So they're probably going to retreat, would be the best move. They do get the open rook. These doubled pawns are not so bad. But again, the point was to remove the dark squared bishop. Also, you blockade the doubled pawns. They can never kick you out with your bishop on b5 now. So you can time it right as to when you want to take the knight, for example. Knight to f6. Just set up the pawn chain. Say castles. Very comfortable position. Now, yeah, let's say they take, you can take the knight first, you can recapture the bishop, and I want to just show how similar the structure is, and the ideas are going to be very similar too. This bishop is going to greatly overpower this knight because of how easy it is to gain attackers over on the f-file. Last thing, let's say they go, instead of d6, let's say they go knight c6, just to show you how similar it is. Knight to c3, pawn d6, still knight a4, and as you could see, it would be a transposition where our structure is just the same. If you want to take it earlier the knight, you could, because again, our structure is just the same. So queen e1, rotate over, get all your pieces into the attack. The bishop is going to thrive on g5. A lot of the times you reach endgames where it's good bishop versus bad knight. And yeah, so these are not very scary. This is less sharp, these lines, so it's more about learning the ideas rather than the exact moves at the exact times. Which is better? Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.